In this video, I'm going to show you some examples of estimating fraction word problems by rounding to 0, a half, or a whole. Question 1 says, based on weight, a homeowner used about 4/7 of a bag of grass seed to fix bare spots in his front yard. He used about 9/10 of a bag in his backyard. So we're going to round to estimate the total amount of grass seed that he used. I always tell my students that estimates are meant to be done quickly and mentally, and estimates should be done before you do the problem. Don't work out the actual problem and then round when you are done. Now in these examples, I'm going to actually do some work to show you how I estimated, but when you start working these out yourself, you might need to practice a little bit by drawing out some of these number lines, but after that, you really should be doing these mentally. So on question 1, we want the total amount. So we're going to want to combine 4/7 and 9/10. I'm going to go ahead and just write an addition sign next to this to remind myself that this is going to be addition. So I'm going to decide what I'm going to round 4/7 to. Here is 0/7. Here is 7/7. Here's 1/2. 1/2 is going to be 3.5/7. And I can write a half above this if I want to remind myself. So this was 0, this was a half, and this was a whole. When I place 4/7 on this number line, it's going to be right about here. And it's only 1/2 of a seventh away from 1/2, but it is 3/7 away from a whole. So when we are rounding, it's going to go back to 1/2. That's what we're going to round it to, is 1/2. So I'm just going to write a half right next to this and mark this out. And then 9/10, you probably could even do that one without doing a number line, because half of 10 is 5, and 9/10 is clearly closer to 10/10 than it is to 5/10. So I'm going to mark this out and put a whole. We want to add these together, so a half plus a whole is 1.5 bags of grass seed. Question 2 says a farmer estimates that she feeds 6/7 of a bag of corn to her chickens and 9/15 of a bag of corn to her pigs each day. About how much corn does she use to feed both the chickens and pigs? And again, this is going to be our total amount of corn, so this is going to be an addition problem. 6/7, we can look back at the previous number line that I just drew, and 6/7 is going to be right about here. It's clearly going to be closer to 7/7 than it is to 3.5/7. So I'm going to mark out 6/7, and I'm going to put one whole. 9/15, if I draw a quick little number line here, here is 0/15, here is a whole 15/15, and half would be 7.5/15. When we place our number on there, 9/15, it's going to be somewhere right about there. And it is 1.5/15 away from 7.5/15 away from a half, but it is 6/15 away from a whole. So when we're rounding it, it's going to go back here to the half. So I'm going to mark this out and I'm going to put a half. Just as we did in the previous problem, we're going to add 1 plus 1/2 equals 1.5 bags of feed for her chickens and pigs. Question 3 says a farmer estimates that each day he feeds his chickens 1/8 bag of corn and the pigs 8/9 bag of corn. About how much more corn does he feed his pigs each day than he feeds his chickens? And again, we're going to estimate. Because we want to know how far apart these two numbers are, that's going to be a subtraction problem. So we need to find our larger fraction, which is going to be the 8/9, and we're going to subtract the 1/8, but we're going to estimate instead of actually doing the real problem. 8/9, you probably can tell right away that 8/9 is very close to one whole, because 9/9 is one whole, and 4.5/9 is 1/2. So I'm going to mark this out and put a whole there. 1/8, without drawing a number line, we can tell that that is very close to 0, because half of 8 is 4, and it's closer to 0 than it is. 1 is closer to 0 than it is to 4. So I'm going to put 0. So 1 bag of corn minus 0 bags of corn is 1 bag of corn. Question 4 says on one dairy farm, 4 tons of hay last 17 days. On a different farm, 4 tons of hay last 5 days. Round each of these fractions 4/17 and 4/5 to 0, a half, or a whole, to estimate how much more hay the second farm uses than the first farm uses each day. Now, this is really the same type of problem as questions 1, 2, and 3. It's just written in a little bit of a confusing way because of that first sentence. When it says 4 tons of hay lasts 17 days, it means every day you're using 4/17ths of a ton of hay because you're taking 4 tons and you're dividing it among 17 days. The same thing with the 4 tons of hay lasting 5 days. You're taking 4 tons and dividing it among 5 days. Remember that fractions are just division problems. To solve this, we will round each number. And when it says how much more hay the second farm uses than the first farm, that is going to be subtraction because we are comparing the two amounts to each other. So I'm going to start with the larger fraction, 4/5. On a number line, here's 0/5, here's 5/5, and half of 5/5 is 2.5/5. 4/5 will be somewhere over here. It is 1.5 away from a half, and it is 1/5 away from a whole. So if we are going to round that to either a half or a whole, it's going to round up to 1 whole. So I'm just going to write a 1 on top of that. And 4/17, here's 0/17, here's 17/17. Half of 17 is 8.5. So 8.5/17 is equivalent to 1/2. And our 4/17 is going to be somewhere over here. It is 4/17 away from 0, but it is 4.5/17 away from 1/2. So when I am rounding this, it's going to round down to 0. We're trying to find how far away they are, how far apart they are. So 1 minus 0 equals 1 ton.